Welcome to What's My Thesis. I'm your host, Javier Proenza. Every week, my guests and I share the answers we found on the questions we have. Join us as we explore and expand our worldview through research and ask what's my thesis. And today, my guest is Adrienne Sacks, who I met officially at, what's it called? It was the High Beam show, right?
Yeah.
In the last social gathering I attended.
Oh, really? Oh my gosh.
The Halloween
Honestly,
show.
not that far off for me either. That was the last party is a strong word because
Yeah.
for everyone being 6 feet apart outside in masks, not drinking or eating,
Yeah.
but party environment. That was the most people I've been around too.
Yeah. It was definitely a fun night.
Yeah,
It,
it was awesome.
it breathed some life into me, and it's actually already been talked about on the show because I had
Oh, really?
yeah. Do you know what's his name? Serge Huitron. He's like part of Museum
Mm.
Adjacent.
Oh,
They
cool.
do that too. But anyway, so
Yeah,
how are you holding up right now? Everything like what's keeping you busy these days?
I'm
You're in
holding up.
LA, but
I'm in
everybody.
LA.
Yeah, and are you an LA
Yeah.
native or where you from originally, bro?
No, no, I'm from Arizona originally, Phoenix, Arizona.
And are you in school right now? You said?
Yeah, yeah. So that's this is really good timing because what's keeping me busy is I'm in the third final year of my MFA at Northridge.
Oh,
And so I'm writing my actual literal thesis, as we speak, that's due in 2 weeks. And I'm pounding it out.
oh my God! And you
So
made do this. Wow. So you're like, are you how confident are you that you're going to get it all done, or are you? Is it still a mad dash to the end?
it's definitely a mad dash, but I,
Okay.
I think it's gonna get done. It's gonna get done. It's one of those things where you and it's, I don't know if other people do this, but when I have a big project, you're like, okay, I have 30 days. So this is what I need to do in each of the days. But then you don't do it for 5 days. So then you're like, okay, never mind, never mind. I have 25 days. And now it's okay, I have 9 days, but it'll be fine. It'll be fine. It's the stuff, it's the same as this kind of thing where it's just about what I think, and my dumb ideas. So I'm just if there's anything I can write, it's my own opinions on everything, and art.
Yeah, I think that.
Just basically opinions anyway. So it's all
Yeah.
good. Yeah.
So yeah, that's interesting. I mean, and are you? It's all telecommuting now, or is that how it's referred to? Or is that just a really antiquated term that's in my brain?
No, no, I think that's accurate. But yeah, I think they'll say virtual classes or we're doing a virtual show, virtual class, virtual exhibition. It's virtual,
Mhm.
virtual, virtual, which I guess is technically true. But I'm just some stuff is virtual and some stuff is just digital, just because it's on the
Yeah.
computer. I'm is it virtual? If it's just a website, I'm not to be persnickety, but I don't know about that.
No, yeah, I think that that's a fair point to make. And literally
Yeah.
while saying that, I was thinking that wait, virtual, how does that even really apply?
Yeah.
I mean, it's real experiences, right? It's a real
Yeah.
experience. I don't know.
Yeah. It's definitely interesting.
It's a different thing in the world.
Yeah, totally.
So then what is the reality of the difference in the Zoom meetings that you and your boyfriend are having? Because
I know. I know. Well, that's what's great. Did you go to art school?
yeah, but not for an
Okay.
MFA. But I mean,
Okay. Well, same thing, just longer and whatever, but just more. But it's the the virtual crit is really strange where a meeting makes sense. People have normal jobs and they're just talking face to face and you can see each other's face and you and I, this is basically all we need. I feel comfortable having a conversation this now. At first
yeah,
it made me so anxious and it just felt so awkward. And I think now I've just been doing it for a year and I'm totally adjusted to it. I'm fine. But the crit thing is insane, truly insane, because it's all about, it's supposed to hypothetically be about like looking at things and talking about that, but you can't see the things. Like you can show a picture of it, or you could like point your camera at it, but it really does change it. And like this, I feel like is a perfect one-to-one for me, like coming and meeting you like in your studio or some other space, you know, but like a crit or like art or like a show, I'm just like, I don't know if it's working, you know?
Yeah, I'm so glad that I'm not going through that. That sounds
Yeah.
like, do you find that it's like the conversations are then more, like, how are the crits going? Like, is it more defensive? Is it more brutal? Is it like, because
No.
there's like a distance, right? So like, can you be more aggressive? Is that, just give me an idea of how it's going in that sense without like,
I don't
naming names.
No, I mean, honestly, like, I don't know where I go, that school, like it's not in general, like aggressive or like cutthroat or like, that's just not the vibe overall, which I'm thankful for. And I think if anything now, it's one of those things where it's like a lot of people, I don't know if like you've noticed this too. And I did it for like, I don't know, probably 5 months, just kind of like stopped making work or like really slowed it down and was just like, what really are we doing here? Like, is there any urgency to this? And like, I think it's good because it really helped me like re-examine what I was doing and like why. But then coming back into like a school environment or crits, I think, you know, it's like easier to be like checked out and kind of apathetic and just be like, you know, on a good day, sometimes it's like really hard to be like invested in like someone else's work and listening to them talk about it. Sometimes it's fascinating. And obviously you're like very generous in this way, but you know, I guess just speaking personally, I think
I
the
totally
apathy can take hold a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a reason that the show is about not talking about art. You know, it's more of talking to artists about how they think about things as opposed to like, hey, explain something visual, you know, like
right.
that. Yes.
No, yeah, it's so crazy. It's like my worst nightmare is when you meet someone new who's not an artist, you know, or creative or anything of the sort. And you're like, what do you do? And you're like, I guess I'm an artist. And they're like, what do you make? And then you're like, oh God, now I have to paint some like word picture of like what I'm doing. And it's like, like, I don't know, I guess, especially with me, it's like, I already think this stuff, it's already silly kind of and like playful. And then when you're trying to talk about it, you're like, okay, this just sounds like kind of crazy. Like I'm the same way. I'd rather talk around it because like the ideas are like interesting to me, but like trying to give like a description, you're like, no, don't make me do that.
Yeah, and I find like, I don't know, it's definitely an easier way. If I can't, I could do show like a show where I show everybody's work on video now that I have the YouTube channel, but that seems
true.
A weird licensing issue that could get crazy, and then B, it's like it's still not the same as like going to actually. It's going to do a disservice to it, right? Like you can't really. You know, I mean, I am definitely going to show some videos of stuff, but like more as an exercise of like I think it's different when you're going in and you're like, oh, hey, there's this show going on at this space, as opposed to I'm going to feature the art of an artist and then we're going to talk about it.
No, this like when you reached out, I was like, this is awesome. Like this is going to be like pure fun, you know? But that would be like pure anxiety. So I'm glad it is how it is. You have 5 stars.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, definitely. Rate and review us, everyone. But so hold on, let me get a little bit more situated. So so your topic, I guess, is very relevant to your experience beyond just like, you know, like you must be living, eating, and breathing it.
Yeah.
So what are we working with? What are we talking about?
I know. It's like a big reveal. Drum roll.
Yeah.
Okay.
I really appreciate that actually, because you were like you speaking about it in broad terms, and now we get to actually hit it. So go.
Yeah. I think I'm gonna do stuffed animals.
Okay. So stuffed animals. I mean, yeah, all right. I can see why.
But really, like, I mean, I tossed around a lot because I'm just like, okay, what is it? I was like, there's a billion different ways I could kind of frame it. And then I'll end up saying, we'll probably have the same conversation anyway, just because like,
No, definitely. But no,
yeah,
I'm just saying that like I've seen what you do. So to me it's not that crazy of like a leap, and it's actually exactly kind of in the space where I wanted to go. So tell me why
great.
you're obsessed with these because all right, I'm gonna reveal something here that maybe completely ruins my career, but I still have a bunch of stuffed animals from when I was a kid. And
Yeah.
I was dating a woman and she was like, this is fucking weird. And I was like, really? Like, this is like, my grandmother gave me this and all of that. So
Yeah.
first off, should I feel ashamed about all the stuffed animals that I have from my childhood?
Yeah, it's a good question. Kind of like ask a stuffed animal expert. I'd say no. I'd say hard no for so
Okay.
many reasons. First off, I have the same thing. I had like for the past few years, like my parents had a lot of like old dolls and some like stuffed animals and stuff like from my childhood. And they were just like, I just left it at their house, when I moved. And they're like, can we throw it away? And I was like, no, don't throw it away. I was like, what? No way. And I kept saying like over and over again, like I'm gonna do like an art project with it. And it's like, they're like, oh, okay. And I was like, no, don't. Of course I'd never do an art project with it like directly until now. Now I like finally did. I had just a huge trash bag of Beanie Babies, the little 90s. Yeah, like 300 probably Beanie Babies.
Did you evaluate its worth?
No, because it's just like,
Oh, I would be
no,
so
because I'd never sell it. I never would. So I was like,
but it was, I mean, just more about the fact that it had this like market value
oh
at the
yeah.
time, you know?
No, that's what's so funny too, because I've asked them. Obviously, like I didn't buy them. My parents did. And I'm just like, this is a lot of Beanie Baby. Like this is an investment into the I was like, what was the deal? And they're like, well, like you were obsessed with them, like it made you happy. And then on top of that, we thought that once you grew up, like we were all told that these were going to appreciate and value so much and be these collector's items. So it's like they were like, oh, this is great. Like, like we'll get these for our kid. And then it's also like a get rich, quick like investment. And I was like, that is crazy. And as soon as I started thinking about that, I think I was like, okay, I'm color me fascinated with this entire thing,
Yeah, of
it's
course.
crazy.
So wait, so then how old were you, if you don't mind me asking, during the Beanie Baby craze? Because it makes me think. Go ahead and answer the question if you feel comfortable. I don't know.
Yeah. Age reveal.
Like
like three to 10.
3 to 10. Okay.
Yeah.
So wow, man. So yeah. So I recently saw a picture on like a retro website about how, or on a retro Instagram that was like, it had a picture of this couple getting divorced and dividing the beanie.
Yes.
You see that one where it was going around? Oh my
Incredible
God.
image. Yeah, that's as good as it gets. That's really as good as it gets. They're all on the floor of the courtroom.
Yeah. So it's
yeah.
that for you, it's like this nebulous sort of, like mysterious kind of like, oh, I kind of remember this shit. Why do I have all these Beanie Babies? Yeah. Remember that shit.
No,
So,
totally.
So you still have it?
Yes. And I'm happy to report that finally, like in COVID, like I said, I stopped, really making work for like 4 or 5 months over the summer, which for me is like a really long time. And then the first thing that kind of got me out of that like funk or whatever was I was like, okay, let me deal with this garbage bag of Beanie Babies that I have under my couch and like figure out what to do. So now I have some might call it a sculpture. I'd call it a coffee table. I would be straight up and call it a coffee table where I made I got like a plexiglass coffee table sized acrylic case made. And now they're all under that. And it's in my living room. And I've like never been happier. I have no regrets about that project. So that was good. Yeah.
So, yeah. And the other thing that it makes me think about is like how dumb we are and about like economics in general, because in the 90s that wasn't the only thing that, like, you know, there was a Superman's dead like we just did not understand rarity as a collectibility like thing. Like it's like, oh yeah, we all have one, like it's a
Yeah.
collectible.
Yeah.
It doesn't have any value. So to
Right.
me, but I am kind of curious if you went and like and looked at how much they're worth just because of that, like, you know, like,
Totally.
you know,
Totally. Yeah. There's
just
like always in the back of your head, you're like, is it maybe? And like, I don't know if other artists are like this. Like, I'm 100% like this. And I know some other people like this that I feel like a lot of artists are like scavengers, you know,
uh-huh.
like they're always trying to like find stuff and keep it, like a little bit of like a hoarding type thing going
Yeah.
on. And then the other thing is like, I'm 100% like this. Like, I love a scam. Like, I'm a bit of a scammer. And it's just kind of like, it's an exciting idea to me of like, let's take something kind of like meaningless and stupid and valueless, and like the idea of it like being worth a lot or valued at a lot or sold for a lot. I'm the same way. It's just interesting to me. I just think it's fascinating. And it's like, oh, if I can get away with that, like, you know, it makes me sound like horrible, like, you know, Mr.
No,
Monopoly man, but it's just interesting.
I
Yeah.
think
And so totally I've looked it up and was like, oh, okay, the purple Diana bear. And then you're like looking up the serial numbers, and then it's like you get in too much the nitty-gritty, and I'm like, I don't care. I don't care.
but you did the ones that you did look into, you found out that they're not worth anything,
No, I
or
mean, honestly, like I did, you know, not a deep dive. I did a pretty like shallow dive into the eBay economy of these things. And it
Mhm.
was like more or less, yeah, more or less valueless, I would say. And like, which is good news for me because I was like, oh, great. Again, hoarding mentality. I was like, awesome. I can buy more. I can make more of these dumb things. Like, this is great. They're not expensive, you know?
Yeah. Well,
So,
it would be amazing if you made collectible art out of Beanie Babies, and you know, like they started becoming like actual valuable items after
yeah,
you go through your ringer.
you know,
Um,
that's the idea. We'll see. We'll
yeah.
see.
So, and then, but it's not just Beanie Babies in general. Like, do you
Yeah.
like? Is there like a thing where you do you mutilate these creatures and like stitch them together and stuff, or
Ye-
like what
Yeah.
do you?
So you saw a little bit
Yeah,
at High Beams, right? Yeah.
you're also
So
before you answer that, you're also a baller because you left out a $20 bill.
yes,
That's
yes. Yeah, that's a little psych experiment on the side. Never hurt anyone. I was like, who's gonna take the
oh,
$20 bill? No one took it.
yeah.
So good
So
crowd.
anyway, so that piece,
Yeah. Yeah. Like what's going on there?
like the teddy bears being mutilated and restitched together. You're sort of like
Yeah.
you know, horror movie kind of
I
into.
know. It's so funny because people like always say that. I like had one studio visit, you know, with an artist, very well respected, who will not be named here, who was just like, you know, saw those, the kind of like Frankenstein together, like little stuffed animal things, and was like, oh, these are really disturbing. And I was just like, ha ha ha, you know, like I know a little bit, you know. And she was like, no, like I think you need like mental health, like treatment. Like was like dead serious, like was so affected by it. And I was like, oh, I mean, you know, I think I'm okay. And it was like, no, like this is really disturbing. And I was like, okay, wow, that's the strongest reaction I've ever gotten. Because when I started doing it, and here we are, you know, getting into describing things, but like I like that was not how I was thinking about it. To me, it's like I love these things. I'm interested in them. I'm interested in like the like childhood stuff. I'm interested in like why we're attached to stuff. I'm interested in the like collectibles and all of that. And it was just like I was thinking about it so much, just like the way anyone would think about any sculpture, I think, whether it's like wood or metal or stone or like, you know, more classic stuff like that, I guess. Where it's like, oh, what can I do? How can I like change it around? Like, can I cut it into some and like get rid of some? Can I add some stuff on? Like, and that's what started getting so like I wasn't like, oh, let me Frankenstein and like
Mhm.
I'm gonna cut its arms off. And like it's interesting because to me, like, and I think artists, maybe I've just thought of it, oh, it's fiber, it's fake
Yeah.
fur, this is all plastic pieces. But people have such strong attachments to these things that they're horrified. And that's where it got really interesting because I was just like, oh, I'm just messing around. Like it's whatever, I'm just experimenting and like, oh, it's fluffy and furry and this is kind of like a fun material. But
Well,
people
and
were like so affected.
I guess when I talk in terms of like the actual mutilation part, that's where I get a little like uncomfortable when I was like framing it like
Yeah.
that. When I think about the piece, the stuff that I saw, like
Mhm.
it's actually more of like a cuteness overload kind of thing. It's not necessarily like, like a monster that you're making. It's more of like just like excessive cuteness, right? Like
Mhm.
it makes sense. It's not
Yeah.
necessarily, it doesn't have that like, oh my God, look at this three-headed creature. It's more like, oh my God, look at how cute this three-headed creature is kind of.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Like I think about that too. And now I've like just gone down an absolute reading rabbit hole about like everything cute because it did start to be like so much about that. And like that was fascinating to me. And there's like all these ideas that like, people smarter than me have written about where it's like that there's like a really fine line basically between cute and monstrous. And like that is really interesting where it's like when something that has like the big eyes and like a tiny mouth and like a huge head, like yeah, like you could be describing something cute. It also kind of sounds like you're describing like a monster. So it's
Interesting.
interesting. And it's interesting that people really flip flop between being like, this is so cute. I want to like give it to my daughter. And like, oh, this is like scary as hell. And like, you are a disturbed human being, like that's a pretty broad spectrum of reactions, but that's what
Well,
makes it fun, I guess.
as a typical dude, I don't spend a lot of time thinking about cuteness, but now that you have me thinking about it, it's actually kind of it comes from a pretty dark place where it's like so that
Mm-hmm.
animals don't kill their own kids, right? Or eat them, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which still happens despite bears being cute and whatnot. So
Yeah.
it's actually kind of a dark, a dwarf
Totally.
is not
Totally.
cute, right?
Yeah, I know. And that's definitely like part of the appeal. And like, it's really funny when I was thinking about this just last night. I was like, stuffed animals. I was like, is there enough to talk about there? And I was like, maybe. And I was like, oh my God, you know what I've never even thought about was the way that like stuffed animals are really just like a stand in now for taxidermy, which is actual dead
Oh,
animals that have been stuffed. You know what I mean? And I'm just like, and I was like, okay, I was like, this I have to look into. I was like, we're the first like stuffed animals, just taxidermy. Like, what's the line? And I was like, okay, interesting. So weird.
yeah. And then it's also crazy because it's like it's pre Disney, I imagine, right? To have like this, it's not anthropomorphic. It's like not anthropomorphizing, but at the same time, it's like you're taking the hard edges off of a fucking bear,
Yeah.
right? Or
Yeah.
like something that could actually like it's like cuddly now. There's like a control
Mm-hmm.
game there too, right? Where it's like I don't know.
Totally.
Is that for children to like maybe maybe feel a little bit more secure about the world or whatever? I don't know. I'm not
Yeah.
obviously trained to make these assessments, but as an artist, it's interesting to think about these things like that, or to just sort of dive into it. So anyway, now I feel less weird about having my stuffed animals. I
That's
might
good. That's what I'm here for.
but yeah, yeah. So, in terms of thinking about it as a material, tell me more about that. Like, what kind of materials are involved, and like like what is the stuffing? What is your interest in all of that?
Yeah, totally. Um, I guess it started out that it was something, the anthropomorphization of it all was something that I was first like, this is crazy. Like it has eyes and it has a face and like it's furry and I'm just attracted to it. And I've always liked it. And I've liked it since I was a kid. And I think I actually like was painting for like, I don't know, 5 years or whatever before I started making more of this kind of sculpture-y stuff recently. And I still do paint. Like there's still painting happening. And in painting, I just love color. I love bright colors and glitter. And it's all stuff just from the time in which I've grown up, you know. I'm 26. And so I don't remember anything really before 1996. And like then I feel like when you're a kid, you're just a sponge, you know, like what you're taking in just gets so baked into your brain. And the way that I see things and what I'm attracted to is like the rainbows and the bright color and the glitter. So I made my background kind of, you know, a little vintage, if you will, as that's the kind of thing I like. And I was doing it in painting and just kind of got like felt a little bogged down, a little stale just for me, because I'd been doing it for a few years. I guess I just got bored. And so then I was starting going out to stores and I was like, well, what's a material, you know, that kind of has those same really fake colors, the really saturated colors, the pastel colors. And like, it's not going to be wood for me or like metal, you know, or marble. Like it's going to be the like synthetic manufactured stuff because that's already the palette that I like and, you know, I'm attracted to. And so I started collecting stuff like that. Like I was getting fake flowers. I love that. Like anything plastic. I really love plastic. And I think, yeah, so it was like a color thing. And people started
plastic is separate from the stuffed animals, or are there like, I mean, because when I think of plastic, first thing that pops into my head is like a toy soldier or an action figure.
Totally.
Like what do we? So like that. So like little figurines.
Yeah, totally. Like any toys, but that's what's crazy about stuffed animals and fiberfill is it really is all plastic. You know, it's not hair. It's not like hair and fur and protein, even though we think of it as like, oh, it's fur. But those furs and like fibers are actually just like very small strands of plastic, which is weird to think about that plastic can be that way as a material. But I love it. And I was attracted to it. And I was just like, thought, oh, this is great. And then it's interesting because what I started doing, as you were saying, I was like cutting. I just enjoyed that process. And then I was using hot glue, which is again, just like this melted plasticky substance that you can use to like rebond the plastic. And it's actually really strong because basically what you're doing is just melting plastic glue and a plastic, you know, second surface and then rebonding it together. And they stay really well, better than it would if you were hot gluing, you know, paper or metal or wood or whatever else. So it's strong. And I was like, this is the best way to do this. You know, I thought about sewing it and it is fabric. Like some of the fabrics are cotton, but the fibers are plastic. So it just sticks together.
Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah, it's cool.
Wasn't there like a bear in the 90s? There was definitely a electric blanket craze that ended pretty quickly.
Oh my God.
Because the houses were burning down.
Yeah. I kind of remember that.
Yeah. I definitely think that there may have been like a teddy bear that was responsible for a few house fires. That was
that sounds right. Yeah, definitely. No, it's
worth
it's so weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. The hot glue gun too. I'm really often like, this seems like really unsafe. Like it's really funny as like a tool because it's like, you know, it's like sculpture. It's like, yeah, I'm very rarely like in a wood shop, you know, with a bandsaw. Like it's like, I just have like this like tiny little like crafty, mine's hot pink, of course, glue gun. And, but it's like, I've gotten into some like near things. First off, the burns are not good. And I burn myself constantly. My fingers are just like fully calloused at this point. And then the other thing is like, I forget that it's plugged into the wall and it leaves like huge piles of hot glue on the floor. And I'm like, that doesn't seem good. And it's like those cheap electronics, you know, that you're just like, I don't think this was designed to be like plugged in and used at like a high heat for like 8 hours. But I'm just like pushing this thing to the limit, you know, it's like, it might not end well. I don't know.
Oh, Jesus. Don't bump out my audience, please.
I know.
No, I'm kidding. That's crazy. So 8 hour sessions of gluing creatures together, like for real? Like that's how long you sit in the studio doing this?
Yeah, like I totally can. And that's funny because it's like, it doesn't happen with painting. With painting, it's like after an hour, I'm like, whatever. Like I'm getting a little, I'll like do it and it's wet and I have to leave and I'm just like, okay. But I can just really, it's really meditative, like one of those processes or whatever that you can just really get in the zone. And like I totally can sit there for 4, 6, 8 hours. And the other thing that's like funny and works well for me is, like many love to watch TV, and painting when you're in it, like you're just, my full attention I feel like has to be on it. I'm not
Mm.
like looking at other stuff at the same time while I'm doing it. But this is so tactile and I'm really just doing it with my hands and doing it by like feel, that it's almost like other fiber arts, I guess, like knitting or embroidery or whatever, where I can totally like watch TV, watch a movie, like have a conversation like while I'm doing it. I don't have to like be fully
Yeah,
committed to it, which makes it easier.
definitely. And
Yeah.
can you give me a little bit more insight into like why the aesthetic of like colors, bright colors, and cuteness? Like, I mean, obviously it's something that you're drawn to, but like,
Yeah.
what do you feel like? Like, obviously, an artist chooses the things that they want to do so that they can communicate certain things. What is it that
Yeah.
you want to like get across that like that this kind of aesthetic? Because obviously we talked about it tangentially in terms of like how dark it actually is. There is like a little
Yeah.
bit of cynicism in there, so I definitely see that. But like, what do you feel
Yeah.
about like
Yeah.
cuteness?
I have thoughts for sure. I feel like that's where it gets more like political, I guess, for me.
Uh-huh.
That's like the political side
All right, let's do it.
of the work. Yeah. So, less fun and games. But basically the way I think about this kind of stuff is that like I'm buying these things as consumer objects at regular stores, like not art supply stores. So I'm really in the sauce of like consumerism, retail, e-commerce. I get a lot of stuff off Amazon. So I like fancy myself, like maybe some people listening to this are like artists, as this like, oh, like, what I'm doing, it's like radical and it's really critical of society and like I hate capitalism and I'm just here to like do my own thing and like make this stuff. But then at the end of the day, I'm kind of like, oh shoot, like I am not only is like maybe everyone like complicit in all of that, but I'm like highly, highly high key complicit in it. And so it took me a while. That's what I mean, kind of with the reflection, to be like, really, really, what are we doing here at the end of the day? And I think the more I thought about it, I was like, okay, the reason I'm attracted to this stuff, like I'm nobody special at all, is the reason we're all attracted to this stuff, which is because it's the perfect capitalist aesthetic, something eye catching that's going to catch your eye in a store. Like if there's a sea of beige and white and black, and then something is like high key saturated rainbow, your eye is going to go to that. And, that's one trick of how to sell someone something. Like cuteness is another really weird one, because when something's cute, we like relate to it the same way we do to like a baby or an infant or a kid, where you want to, it's just hardwired into our brains as human beings for the most part, that you want to like pick it up and hold it, and like we just have like a psychological reaction to it, and then the other thing is that all of these like stuffed animals in particular, but some other stuff that I'm into too, they're objects that are meant to comfort you. So kind of just like all the other great capitalist hits, alcohol, tobacco, slot machines. They're things that like when you're having a bad day, probably because of your like job and your boss that you're over, it's something that you can turn to. And the idea is that it's going to make you feel better. What's like interesting to me is that I think it used to be something that people were stuffed animals. You think kids, childhood, that you were buying it, primarily for your kids. But that's where like this starts boring out into like some other things I'm interested in, because I feel like a lot of those properties of like stuff being furry and shiny and glittery and rainbow has like started like trickling down into like other objects and like becoming an aesthetic that like here today, like I think it started in the 90s and it got like more accelerated in the 2000s, but like that's the reason I'm buying this stuff is just because I see it everywhere. And it's like I'm in line at Walgreens and I'm buying, you know, like regular household stuff. But then it's like there's a big bin of like, you know, rainbow plushy cutie rhinoceroses. And I'm like, what's that doing here? Like that's crazy. And it's just like it's so weird. And like I guess most people are buying them for their kids, but it's like weird when it's in the context of just like beer and cigarettes and condoms and like Ritz crackers. And then it's like, why do we have this bin of this here? Like it's such like an essential need. And it's just because people will buy it. And then not only is it those, it's like then it's like the t-shirts, like clothing where it's like, okay, now I'm going to have clothing that's like, looks the same, like rainbow, fuzzy, furry thing that has like a slogan that's like, I'm a unicorn and I love mermaids. And it's like, it's just, it started like, I just started seeing it everywhere. And it's totally one of those like crazy person things where it's like, people are like, oh, I see the same number everywhere I go. And I'm just like, I see like rainbow unicorn stuff everywhere I go. And some people are like, oh yeah, I totally know what you're talking about. And some people are like, do you? Like, are you sure? But yeah, at this point, I'm totally just like looking for it. So I see it everywhere. Yeah.
I bet it is everywhere. And I just like kind of gloss over it.
Yeah.
But what is crazy though is that like it's not, I don't feel like I'm getting a sense that you're into camp so much for the sake of camp, right? Like or tackiness for the sake of tackiness. Like there is an aesthetic like consideration, even your background. I mean, it is so fucking 90s, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, it's cheesy, but not tacky, you know, like there's a distinction, right? Am I wrong here? Okay.
No, I don't think so. And like, yeah, that's the stuff, that's the more like, again, to get deeper, that's like the more like theory based stuff that I'm interested in, or in like, or philosophy based stuff is like aesthetics, where like people will write and talk and lecture until the cows come home about the beautiful and the sublime. But there's like kind of infinite aesthetic categories that I think are more interesting and more relevant today in like 2021 to be talking about. And whether that's, you know, camp, some people will say is not an aesthetic. So that's up for deliberation, but like cute or quirky, or I have been reading like really great stuff about like gimmicky and like interesting and zany. Like those are things that it's like, okay, yeah, let's talk about that. Like, what is that? Like, what is that quality really? What does it represent politically? What does it represent just in like everyday life? Like that's the stuff I can like really just like nerd out on, you know, forever. Cause it's really interesting to me. There's like a high-low thing where people don't talk about it.
No, definitely. Well, so tell me about, is there anything specific that you think people should know about gimmicky? Like since we've been talking
There's
about.
just one book that like is fantastic that everyone should read. I can like hold it up. We're at my desk. So I have like right stacked beyond my laptop is like, let's see. I'm one of those people that's always reading like 14 books at once and they're all on my desk. And it was funny. Like my boyfriend was just in here helping me like set up nicer webcam lighting situation, which is highly appreciated. And he's like, your desk is giving me so much anxiety because there's just like books and like pens and like there's craziness happening, you know, here and behind the background. And we're just in a little moment of virtual peace. But anyway,
it is book, so the background then. I didn't realize the effect that it was having.
Yeah, it's nice because otherwise it would just be like really what's going on behind her.
I feel like
what's happening. Okay, this is the book that I would put, you know. Oh no, the background, it's betrayed us. The background's bringing chaos. Anyway.
Let me see it
again. Okay. Let's try it one more time. I might just have to do it the old fashioned way by speaking, but I wanted like a visual pure chaos. It's called Theory of the Gimmick.
of the gimmick. All right.
And then the subtitle is Aesthetic Judgment in Capitalist Form. Bingo.
Okay.
It's really, really, really cool. And this is my favorite writer, theorist in general right now. I don't know how to say her last name. I've never heard it said out loud. I've only read it. But Cyan Ngai, Ngai. I wish I knew how to say it, but I don't. So good. And I'm still in the middle of it, so I don't even want to talk on it yet. But it's like the same thing. I feel like all of her writing and like a lot of the other stuff that I'm interested in too is just picking apart from every angle, you know, what's gimmicky. And gimmicky, I think, is like really interesting. And I'm so excited to keep reading the book because that's one that's like, it has a negative connotation, you know? It's not cute, has, I think, a positive connotation for the most part. Sometimes it's like used against, I think it can be like weaponized basically, but gimmicky is like straight up negative. When you call something gimmicky, it's like, oh, and that idea is like really interesting to me where it's like, just the stuff like I've read, these are not my ideas, it's all from the book, of just like the idea of like a shortcut and cheating. And I think that is like really relevant to like art and artists. Like, again, I was talking about scamming. Like, I think scamming leads to a gimmicky aesthetic, maybe. And the shortcuts are interesting, but that's like always what we're doing. It's just like taking random materials, not random, but like maybe from the outside, and then trying to manipulate it in a way where in the end it's like greater than the sum of its parts, you know? But I don't know. Interesting.
No, it definitely is.
Yeah.
It's great. Thank you for sharing all of this. This is like pretty, I've never given so much consideration to some things that are like, I mean, they are definitely what cuteness, like as you say, it's definitely weaponized. And I think one of the things is that like there's like a protectiveness that comes inherent in cuteness. Like you want to protect it, you want to keep it safe because like the world is so cruel. And
totally.
Innocence, and so there's like a projection mechanism that happens there as well. It's like I really should have spent a lot more of my life. I'm 40 now, and I've like never even really just given this much thought to this. This is fascinating. It's crazy.
Yeah, I think it is too. And I feel like it's kind of nice because it's something that I've like butted up heads with, you know, the art community as a whole, I feel like already, which again, to me is just fascinating because I like, there's a part of me that likes getting a little bit of a rise out of people. So as soon as people like have a strong reaction, I'm kind of like, ooh, what's that all about? And I love to like faux psychoanalyze people. So as soon as someone starts kind of having a reaction, I'm like, this is good. This is rich. But I felt like already it's like, just as like a young woman in the arts already, I think there's maybe perhaps a slight, you know, penchant towards not taking young female artists seriously, young femme artists even, amongst so many other groups, but just speaking from my experience. And I already felt like, okay, no matter what I'm doing, even if I'm making this really serious work, I was doing like oil paintings, they were not glitter. I was like doing like realist painting and like figure painting. And it just felt like no matter what I'm doing, no one's really taking it seriously. So that kind of, I feel like gave me permission to be like, well, what's the ultimate thing that someone would not take seriously? And it's perfect because it's like my genuine like aesthetic and interest anyway, you know? So I'm like, I know more about it. I'm more comfortable talking about it. I'm more interested in it. And it like, that's where I feel like things started like clicking for me, where I feel like that's like good advice in general for everything in life is just like, don't try to be someone you're not. And I'm just like, I'm a 26-year-old girl who was like raised, you know, in like, I don't know, like a mid-sized city in the 90s and early 2000s. That's who I am. That's all I know. So why try to do something else?
And stuff.
Sorry, what was that?
Did you spend time at the mall and whatnot?
Yes, totally. Huge mall rat.
Very specific experience that's dying out. So like, you know,
yeah,
I know that there's some important to that importance. Like there's like a a documentation of a generational thing that's like dying out,
Yeah,
which,
totally.
and the mall was something that killed the mom and pop store. It's just like this like crazy, like there
Right.
are
Right.
layers to all of it if you just kind of like look a little bit underneath the surface.
Totally. And that's the mall is like, and like the dead malls. I'm like fascinated by that kind of like, like light ruin porn type of thing. But it's like always been important to me that my work doesn't start like veering into nostalgia, especially for like capitalism, where it's like nostalgia, like as a general like feeling, I totally understand. And like, yes, I feel it all the time. And it's like, yeah, a lot of this stuff is totally implicated in it because it's stuff from my childhood and like it relates to like the way I grew up and everything else. Like, but it's like we don't need to be nostalgic for like the mall, so to speak. Like it's just like a space where everyone was like bought and sold things. But then it gets complicated because it's like people had real experiences there. They had friendships and like relationships and like your life was there. So like, yeah, it's not a pure space. It's not a church by any means, not that that's maybe a pure space either, but like, it's interesting. Like I feel that tension a lot where it's like, what exactly are we being nostalgic towards? And I feel like maybe that's where like the impulse comes in a little bit to like deconstruct things physically and make it like a little bit like weirder or ickier or like more off-putting, where it's like I don't want to just make these like shrines to like the 90s and like Y2K and like how awesome and amazing it was, like because it wasn't for me personally. I don't know who it was for. Like I'd imagine not most people. Like the country hasn't been working for most people for a really long time, so like it's important to me and I think about that all the time. And I think that's where I'm like, okay, I welcome like the like darkness and like shadow kind of stuff into the work because it helps it not to just be like my worst nightmare would be like, oh yeah, like everything's like rainbows and butterfly and sunshine. And like, I think that is like one read of the work, but I think most people like at the end of the day are like, it's kind of creepy.
I mean, even just I think that like wasn't there in the one that you had at the high beams, wasn't there a thing where it was like a dog, like a group of dogs, but they were just like one massive blob? Like, I mean, I think those things are kind of like, I think that having that being the off-putting element, where it's not really off-putting, it's kind of cute, but I don't remember exactly the aesthetic of it, but I do remember just kind of thinking about sort of just like I think that that's a valid thing to say about your work. I think that like there's definitely something there that it's definitely overtly about capitalism, right? Like in the sense that I didn't get nostalgia from it. I actually got like the sense that I was like looking at the latest thing, right? Like oh my God, this is the newest, cutest fucking thing and every kid needs to have it, right?
Yeah.
Space more, like obviously right now you have the 90s thing and because we're doing it, to some degree, like performative for this conversation, and that's totally fine. Like I really appreciate that. I like that element of it. But no, I definitely agree with you in the sense that there's not a feeling of like being precious about it. It's cuteness, it's predatory cuteness. It's almost like it's aggressive. It's like it's not there's no like vignette around the picture, like it's like it's like shiny and new. So I think that that's interesting. It's like, I don't know, but yeah, man, this is really fascinating. I really appreciate you coming in and schooling me on this side of capitalism, because it's something that you just kind of see and you take for granted. But you don't realize how sinister it is. And now I have another thing to just be cynical about.
Yeah, exactly. I know. I'm just like here to crush everyone's like childhood attachments and dreams.
I mean, yeah. That same like getting a rise out of people's streak too. Like, I definitely don't want to say the thing that's not going to upset people just because it's going to upset people.
Totally.
I definitely don't want an audience that doesn't feel comfortable being challenged, for sure. Because then you say one thing and they're like, oh my God, you're fucking canceled. It's like, no, man, like the world is a lot more complicated than that, right? Like, not that I go around saying things that would get me canceled, but you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, no, I feel like that's where like I have that streak, that likes to get a rise, but it's been really good for me, like as I've gotten older, to try to channel it into criticality instead of just like mindless,
trolling.
yeah, or just like being critical is so much more interesting than being like offensive or making like some like
Yeah.
dumb joke that's like not thought out. And like being critical is so much different than being hurtful or violent, much less violent. So I feel like that's always where my focus is. And that's like what keeps it interesting, is like the little bit of like, yeah, like, fuck the system. But like, it really is about that. Like, it is about a political project. Like, it is about stuff that I really believe in. And then underneath all of that, it's like, I feel good and like sleep at night because it's like, I know what my beliefs are. And it's like, criticality is like a powerful tool for trying to shed light on things, which I think is one function art could have. And making people think differently, like that would be great, just even very, very slightly. I still think it's exciting. And then like if the end goal is like, yeah, critiquing capitalism, which is basically like a system that I think is like really truly violent against, me and all the people in my life that I care about and the world as a whole. Like, so it's like, that's what's interesting too, is like, I feel like we were touching on it for a second earlier, where sometimes people are like, well, are you being ironic with this stuff or is it like sincere, and it's like, that's a really interesting question because, I know what I think and like those beliefs, that I just spelled out, like that's sincere. That's as like sincere as I can be. But I think it's interesting with cuteness, like as an aesthetic or some of those aesthetics that aren't necessarily welcomed with open arms by the art world all the time. It can come off as ironic because it looks out of place. It's unexpected.
Why can't it be both ironic and sincere?
Mm-hmm. Do you say
Like,
the
what?
goal is?
No, I said, why can't it both be ironic and sincere?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
I don't know. I don't understand the idea of it being mutually exclusive by the person asking you this question. I think that I think it's fair. You can be sincerely ironic.
Right. I think that is like totally the groove that I fit into. Probably that's probably closest to the truth.
I think that there's some element of like where I relate to with your practice is that I think that like I like to bring things into people's attention that are maybe not things that are upsetting, but in a way that doesn't necessarily burden them. Like I like the ideas that are relatable to everybody of like the modern experience. It's not even, it sounds like you're not even like rooting for necessarily a particular team. You're just like railing against capitalism, right? Like, because sometimes political art can be like in service of like, like let's go with the Hope poster, right? Like in support of something. But like, but yeah, I think that there's like a sense of like connecting on a human level with somebody is really interesting. Where you get to the sense that they can have fun while they're having like a really painful thought.
Yeah, totally,
like,
totally.
And I think that's where kind of humor is really helpful in getting that. I definitely relate to that element of like what you're into, like in terms of just like, I mean, you can talk about heavy things and still have it be fun. And I think that like that's something that it seems like elevates the work rather than makes it like not acceptable to contemporary art, which like, who the fuck is like, there's so many problems with it as a concept anyway. So, right. Like, so it's all done.
Yeah. I mean, totally.
It's definitely not pro any of that notion. So I really appreciate it. I think that you're bringing some really interesting stuff like that. I think, I think if your objective is to surprise people with smart things, like you have, I was not prepared, to think about this hard about stuff that I hadn't thought about before. So thank you very much. I mean, this is like
Yeah.
fucking really, really smart shit. I mean, not that I'm surprised that you're smart, but not everybody comes with the topic of like simple as like teddy bears or stuffed animals, and then is like, I'm gonna also blow your mind a little bit, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I just appreciate, like, I truly was so excited because it's just like, you know, I don't get to talk about it often either. And that's what's something that's interesting about being an artist or writer, where it's like, for me, it's my 24/7. This is like, I don't really know anything about anything else. This is the only thing at this point that I feel like comfortable talking about. It's everything I'm reading, everything I'm watching, everything I'm doing, everything's affected by it. I wake up thinking about it. I go to sleep thinking about it. Like that, I think, and I didn't necessarily expect that. Like art has just like swallowed me up in such a way where, and I think maybe it's part of just the way my brain works too. I think I'm a little bit like attention deficit. I would argue that a lot of people, my age, or people that spend as much time on the internet as I do, or maybe grew up that way, and it's just going to become more so, I think, are like that, where I'm always looking at and reading and thinking about like 100 or 200 things at once. And it's ended up being kind of like generative and like good for me. I used to feel really distracted, but more and more I feel like as I can like draw the lines and connect the dots between everything, I'm like, okay, I'm not freaking crazy. Like at the end of the day, everything is like related in some way, and it's just an interesting project to like sit around and think about how it's all related.
What generation are you?
I guess I'm a millennial.
You are a millennial. And do you remember a time before the internet? Like, do you remember? I mean, it's fine if you just remember the early times of the internet, but like 96.
I don't remember a time before the internet. I remember one of my really vivid memories is like the first house I remember being in as a kid. So I was like 4 and 5. My bedroom was next to where my dad had his like computer desk set up, like was on the other side of that wall. And so like I remember going to bed at night, like whatever, 8:30. And I'd be laying in bed trying to fall asleep. And I would hear the like, woo, woo, the dial up internet sound. Cause like, like my parents had put me to bed and then we're getting on the computer and going online. And it was so incredibly loud. I don't know if it was just like synced to our speakers or something, or if everyone's was that loud, but in my memory, it's like burned in my brain the exact tones. And I would hear it every night and be like, what? And I remember always like, I think I like asked a lot of questions as a kid. I was that kind of kid. Cause I remember like over and over and over again coming out of my room and being like, what is that sound? And my dad being like, it's the internet. And I was like, what? And it's just like already, I was 5 and I would lay in bed being like, the internet, that's the sound of the internet, and just like wheels turning, that's what I remember. It's weird. Yeah, it's really weird. And I didn't understand it then. Now it's like hilarious. And I remember the first camera phones. I remember another memory with my dad. I remember him reading Time magazine while we were eating breakfast. And he was like, look at this. And it was like a picture of the first camera phone. And he showed me a picture and was explaining it. He was like, it's a camera attached to a phone. And I was like, whoa. And he's like, this is going to change absolutely everything. And I remember being like, it's a camera attached to a phone. Like, okay. And, here we are. That for years, I was like, I remember the first one. I remember you saying that, and I've like, why do you think that? And you'd kind of go on about it. I was like, I don't know. But yeah, here we are. So I remember all that stuff. I remember going on the internet on my phone for the first time. I remember a girl in high school was checking her grades on her phone. And she was like, what'd you get on the math test? I was like, I don't know. I'll look when I get home on the computer. And she's like, just use my phone. And I was like, what? And it was like, you're on the website? Yeah, first like iPhone, like that I'd like I don't think I
I,
knew iPhones had the internet, you know?
yeah, I
So
remember the
weird.
first iPhone. I was dating somebody that was like living in a different town, and she had just gotten one, and I was visiting, and it was like
Yeah.
it was so efficient at texting that like I completely lost her to the phone.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now
It's
it's like a
crazy.
given, but back then it was just I was like, I'm sitting next to someone who's not here, you know? It's
Hmm.
crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. It's really fascinating. And yeah, it's shocking to me sometimes that like I think like I don't really think that much about the internet, you know, like the internet, and it doesn't even come into my work that much. I think sometimes like when people are like, oh, you're obsessed with the 90s Y2K thing, you know, like the internet, and totally, it's all related, you know, somehow, but it's like I think I take it so for granted
Yeah.
that I would never think about like examining it. What I don't take for granted is like capitalism and like
Yeah.
shirts that are like rainbow furry, like shine. I'm like, what is going on? But the internet, I'm like, oh yeah, the internet's the internet. It's here. It's weird.
Yeah. All right. Well, I guess we'll wrap up. There was something that you just said that kind of made me want to ask you a question, but then I blanked. What was it? Fuck. Um, I don't think I'll be able to remember, which is a bummer because I was like, wait, what? I'll remember. I remember when I watched the tape over again, and I'll be like,
Yeah.
but
No, it'll be good. We can talk anytime. I would love
yeah,
to.
yeah, no, I definitely want to have you back. It's crazy just to listen to. I love like these intergenerational. Oh, okay, now I remember. Thank fucking God.
Yay.
You brought up Y2K twice, and you have an obsession with it.
Yes.
Like, let's do a little
Yes.
of that before we wrap up, okay? Like, because that I don't even
Yeah.
remember how insane that is, unless
Yeah.
everyone's to remind them. It's one of those
Yeah.
things you think about it, and you think about it, and you're like, oh, what?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Dumb.
Yes, I
Silicon.
am obsessed with it for sure. I'm totally obsessed with it. I was 6 years old in January 1st, 2000. So it's some of my earliest like vivid memories. And my parents actually had like rented a cabin far out so that like we were going to go there for the Y2K experience, you know, because they didn't want to be in the city. They wanted to be far out in the forest. I remember asking a ton of questions, so many questions about
Yeah.
why we were going to this cabin, what was going to happen, what's the danger. And I think they didn't want to scare me, you know, about what was like going on. But then it's like they weren't giving me enough information. So it just made me like more and more curious, you know? But the Y2K thing, it's like, I think now why I'm so obsessed with it is, you know, I guess this is kind of niche, maybe to like people, maybe it's like my age, maybe it's, you know, girls, femmes, I don't know. But basically, like Y2K as an aesthetic, you know, does this make any sense to you?
Kind of.
Like,
Is
yeah,
it?
like where it's like basically it's cool now. I would say trendy, maybe not cool, but it's trendy to like dress as if the year is 2000. It's like an aesthetic to
Mhm.
like dress and present yourself that way and do your hair that way and do your makeup that way and dress that way and maybe have that kind of furniture and set up your house that way. Like, so
Mm.
that's already interesting that like a time period as recently as 21 years ago is now an aesthetic. That's one thing. And that's like the difference between like, you know, as I said, I'm a millennial. This is more of like a Gen Z thing. So maybe people like 5 years, 10 years younger than me, um, who don't remember it. I was 6. So they either weren't born, maybe one, maybe two, they don't remember it. And so that's what's fascinating because already you can see how it gets like divorced from the historical context that we're referring to as Y2K as an actual event and like news cycle and like cultural phenomenon, not the aesthetic of it,
Yeah.
which is basically like what celebrities were wearing on the red carpet at the same time. But all of the meaning has gotten collapsed into just being Y2K, and
Uh,
no one even knows what it means anymore. And that
okay.
fascinates me. That's
That's
it.
crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. for people that don't really know or weren't paying attention, like there were books written that were like, there was a book by Kurt Anderson called The Turn of the Century, which was kind of like written, it was written a few months into the future and released like right as like, it was all about how the world was kind of gonna end. It coincides with it, like, but yeah, it was basically, there was like a Nike commercial about somebody going out and jogging as the world is falling apart outside. It was like a big fucking deal. And the whole premise was that when programmers started making computers, they didn't put like the full date. They only put like, you know, 08, 09, 010, you know? And so the whole world was supposed to come collapsing down, and it fucking didn't. And it's just like, but to me, it's just so interesting because it still goes to show, like, we give so much credence to these tech giants as if they have like, as if they're geniuses, like Zuckerberg, like he's some kind of fucking genius. He just kind of stumbled into like selling people's data. He didn't even really have a plan, and he made an IPO, and then eventually that's what it became. Like, these people don't know what the fuck they're doing. They're all Gen Zers, which I'm like the last year for Gen Z, but or no, Gen Xers, which I'm the last generation or year for that. But like, they don't fucking know the world. Like they just think they do. And so like, to me, it's crazy when they just do things like, oh, this guy's a genius, he disrupted the market. Like, no, he exploited people. Like, that's fucking not new. You know, Jeff Bezos, what's his name? So to me, it's crazy. Like, just, it's more about ceding to power, I think, than to actually like acknowledging that their intellect. It's like, well, fuck, they're in charge now, so we got to call them geniuses.
Yeah.
But, so anyway,
just for peace of mind. I know, I'm glad we tacked it on, because that was one of the things I was like, maybe I'll come on and say the topic's Y2K. And I was just like, no, stuffed animals.
Stuffed animals. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, maybe I'll, no, I'm not going to show anybody my stuffed animals. Running away to go get it.
Yeah. Keep the mystery alive.
But I have, I can tell you one of them's named Beach Bum, and we used to call him Beachy Bum. And then my sister has a stuffed animal that has seen more of the world than like most humans, which is like a very privileged thing to say, but like tragic. But yeah, we have a teddy bear. His name was Teddy. And
oh my gosh.
My dad used to pretend that Teddy would beat him up.
Oh.
So yeah, they are. There are like, I mean, Teddy is like a character in our family, even though he's like an animal. So it's like that. It's like a picture of a loved one kind of thing.
Totally.
Yeah. Totally. Anyway, do you have any stuff that you want to promote? Other than your Adrienne Sucks, right?
At Adrienne __sucks.
You're such a young person.
Yeah, that I am for a few more years. It's the time is really, coming to an end. But I
was like, man, I wouldn't even want to project that out there. Javier sucks. Like, there's so many people who probably already do think that.
Yeah, no, but if I say it, no one else can. So
yeah, it's part of that, like that sort of like get a rise out of people.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like the contrarian in you, Adrienne. So yeah, it's at Adrienne _sucks, right?
__. Yep.
And then __ at the end. Okay. And then your website?
Yeah, it's my name. So it's www.adriennesacks.com.
You are definitely old enough to say www still.
www. Yeah. You gotta. We love the World Wide Web. Yep.
And then we're at What's My Thesis on Instagram, Twitter, and a whole bunch of other stuff. And you can subscribe to us on YouTube if you want to see Adrienne's beautiful background that we've been talking about all day.
This is so exciting. I didn't know it was going to be on YouTube. I thought this was all just for you. And now.
Oh, no, this is, you're nailing it.
This is great. This is great. What a pleasant surprise.
Yeah. All right. Have a good one.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
It was a pleasure. Bye.
Bye.